The question that I always ask myself is, how can I provide more value to the industry, to our community, to the global population, right?
Right.
So it's also essential to find mentors,
Okay.
I think there are multiple misconceptions. I think one of them is, folks think they're going to fail and they're going to learn too. But at the same time, it's the work that you put in the 5 a.m.s, the midnights. I'll say try low cost, high return type of businesses where they say fail fast, right? So you learn and you can start to explore. So one of the first ventures I explored this was back in 2003 or 2004, was the e-commerce. When I sit here today and I look back, you have to shuffle through a few ideas.
Most people dream of starting their own business, but very few actually take the leap. Why? Because of overthinking, societal pressure, fear of failure, and the big question, where do I even start? Well, today we're sitting down with someone who has figured it out. His name is Varghese Thomas, who also goes by Robin Thomas, a husband, father, entrepreneur, and a leader who has built a career at the intersection of business, education, and mentorship. As the founder and CEO of Zindak Investments, he owns and operates businesses in engineering, manufacturing, real estate, and financial services, all while serving as a senior director of operations at Veeco, a global player in the semiconductor industry. And if that is not enough, he's also pursuing a PhD in industrial and systems engineering at Rutgers. So in today's episode with Robin, I'm looking forward to breaking down the challenges of overthinking, societal expectations, funding a business, dealing with failure, and most importantly, how to actually get started. So whether you are an aspiring entrepreneur or someone looking for that final push to get started, you don't want to miss this conversation. I'm going to start from this question here. Your name, Varghese Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
What's the mystery between Varghese Thomas to Robin Thomas?
I mean, it's pretty simple. Robin is a nickname that my parents gave me when I was born. And when they decided to make the name official, they said, hey, let's make it Varghese Thomas. Varghese is actually my grandfather's name.
Okay.
So they wanted to link me to the family. But at the same time, they wanted a more simple name to call me at home. So they figured, hey, call him Robin. And I don't think there was much thought put into it. I heard it was supposed to be a different name. It was supposed to be Monsi. But somehow the family discussed and said, hey, let's just call him Robin.
Let's just call him Robin. All right. And it's just stuck now.
Just stuck now, yeah. I think 50% of who I know calls me Robin. The other 50% knows me as Varghese.
Right out of the box, you've got a lot going on from what I've seen, right? You have multiple businesses, real estate ventures. You're a senior director of operations at Veeco, and you're pursuing your PhD. And shall I say a part-time dad as well?
So, full-time dad.
Full-time dad? Okay. Let's put it that. Well, we need to confirm that.
Yeah.
But how important is sleep to you? And how often do you sleep? Or like how much sleep do you get in a day?
I think I put a lot of value to actually getting good sleep.
Okay.
And it varies for people. For me, if I get a good 6 hours, that usually helps me recharge and gets me going. Now, like you said, I have 3 little kids at home.
Yeah.
And for the past 5 years, obviously the schedule's been a little upside down. Sleep is luxury, but I try to get at least about 5 to 6 hours of sleep.
Got it.
Yeah. To get.
So what's your daily routine like? What kind of keeps your sanity in check?
Well, it's good that you actually said routine, because routine is really important, and a good schedule, consistent schedule is really important to do everything that I'm trying to do.
Organized.
Yeah, so you're more organized. So my days are early. My day starts at 5 a.m. and I usually try to get some work done early in the morning, and then the routine starts with our kids.
Wow.
They're up at 6:30, and then I have work that I do, with my full-time job, and then I try to cut everything off like around 6:30. Family time, get the kids in bed. But everything that I do is on a calendar. It's on a routine. I know what I'm doing on my Mondays. and on what I'm doing on my Tuesdays and so on and so forth.
Is all pre-planned early in the week,
Yeah.
like around the weekend, or do you plan it as you go along?
So I use my Sundays typically to plan for the week.
Okay.
And I look at my schedule about a couple of weeks out,
Okay.
because there's a lot of stuff that I have to prepare for. So I make sure that everything's on a calendar, and I try to follow the calendar as strictly as possible.
Got it. So let's go back a little bit, right? So I want to understand, when was the first time you kind of realized like you have this entrepreneurial mindset in you, right? And I'm sure you get this question a lot too. So walk us through that. What made you take the risk? What made you think that you had this mindset?
I always felt like I had that entrepreneurial spirit in me, right? Early on, I just never knew what it was and how to explore it.
Okay.
But I always tried just different things that came my way.
So starting when?
I would say starting from college, undergrad.
From college?
From
okay.
undergrad, yeah.
So you never sold anything up until you were in college? You never tried to sell anything?
No.
Okay. So
just take it maybe a step back. We immigrated to the U.S. When I was a senior in high school.
Understood.
So,
okay.
When you come to, of course, the land of opportunities,
right,
and then you start to see what possibilities are out there, then you start to sometimes question some of the traditional norms, right? But I always knew in my heart that I wanted to be an engineer. Because my dad's an engineer, right?
Got it.
So I pursued my engineering degree, but I kept my eyes and my mind open to, what else is out there, So I wasn't stuck on, pursuing only engineering, but I was also keeping my mind open on what else can I get good at? What else can I get into and explore?
Okay. So along the way, you kind of figured out like, you want to have something of your own.
Yeah.
And you thought about diving into that. So walk us through that mindset when you started thinking about, you wanted to have your own business. What came up into your mind? Like, did you just have a clear idea of like, what you wanted to get into, or did you have to like shuffle through a few of the ideas, and how did that go through?
I think, when I sit here today and I look back, you have to shuffle through a few ideas before you really figure out like what to get into. Some people are fortunate that at a very young age, they know exactly what their strengths are,
right,
and they tap right into it, and then they go full speed.
Right.
For example, Bill Gates, like he just came out with a book, right? Source Code.
Correct.
Talks about, he found out at a very young age that he was strong in math.
He started at 12.
Correct. And he continued that journey.
Yeah.
And went full blown into that journey.
Right.
I always knew I was good at science, math, hence pursued my engineering degree. But I always had this business acumen, right? And for me, when I look at business, it was, okay, what other value can I add to the society? So then I started to explore. So one of the first ventures I explored was, this was back in 2003 or 2004, was the e-commerce. It was, it was getting some speed, it was getting some heat. So I was really into cars. I was really into aftermarket, modifications for cars. And I started to work on my car. But at the same time, I started to look at, pricing for parts and accessories and things like that. Long story short, I started my own e-commerce store, right?
Okay.
So I had a website going, I had an eBay store. Back then, Amazon wasn't a thing yet. It was only getting up to speed. Did that for a little bit. Then the market started to get saturated. Then I started to focus a bit more on school. Went back, graduated, started to work. Then when I started to work for companies, I quickly got into administration, the business side of things. Mm-hmm. And then it reignited this whole business idea and wanting to do something on my own, or wanting to explore what it would feel like to do business again, right? And still had no idea what to explore, what I was good at. For me, the ideal scenario was that I would invent something as an engineer, a product or a process.
Did that ever happen?
That never really took place.
Not yet.
Because, we had a senior project where, we built the first, we went to NASA and we did the moon buggy race. So as a team, we designed and built a moon buggy.
Okay.
And we took it to Alabama, and they have like basically a racetrack set up for different teams from different universities to actually race in this competition, and they've been doing it for years. And I thought, maybe that would be a track for me, but that never really panned out. I mean, that we did this as a project, graduated, continued to work, and then I got introduced to, one of my buddies. He's in the financial business, and he said, "Hey, why don't you try this? It requires very little investment, but at the same time, you get to explore what that industry looks like." And back then, I didn't have capital either, right? So for me, it was getting into something of very low investment. So then I started to explore that. And that was like towards my late 20s. And I found it quite interesting, right? Because it was something different. That's the other thing too. I wanted to do something different than engineering too,
So this is while you're in college?
No, in college, the venture that I got into was the e-commerce business, and then I got out of it.
Okay.
I graduated from college. I started to work a few years.
Okay.
And then I would say towards like my late 20s, like when I was 28, 29, got into this. And then I said, okay, you know what? I always see myself going back into wanting to do something different. Okay. Why not stick with it and, and see where it takes me, And I was fortunate enough to help a lot of clients while learning my own personal finance.
Right.
But I still had this, I want to do more, what other industry, and then I got into real estate.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And the reason why I got into real estate was because I was buying my first home. And I spoke to my wife and I said, why not, let me just get licensed and let's go buy our first house, And I went and got licensed when I got my first house. And then it was my wife who actually said, listen, you have your real estate license, you have your financial licenses. Why don't you put that together and see if you can be like a one-stop shop for everybody?
Right.
I said, okay, I guess that makes sense. Then I started to do just that. I basically started to be this one-stop shop where folks can come to me for their financial literacy and then also their real estate go-to person.
Okay.
And then both of them were taking off more on the real estate side. And I said, okay, now I'm enjoying what I'm doing, because I get to explore with my full-time job, being an engineer, running a corporate business. I get to explore the financial industry. I get to explore real estate. This is exactly, and then it started to click in my mind. I said, again, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to see if I can provide value in different industries. Yeah.
So you're building it as you're going. So it sounds like you're not overthinking the process. No. You're just getting into the process and just letting it roll and see where it kind of takes you.
Correct.
Along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest challenge. Like when you think about like anybody who wants to become an entrepreneur, right? They have ideas.
Yeah.
But they overthink, sit on it for too long, and then they finally give up on it. Right?
Yep. Either sit on it for too long or they go into multiple avenues at the same time. You want to be able to, there's a saying where, where they say fail fast, right? So you learn and you can move, right?
Fail fast. I like that.
And that's so important because, like you said, if you sit on it for too long, you may never get started.
Correct.
There's never a right time to start. You have to start, But at the same time, if you explore different avenues, jump into it, learn and execute. Right. And if it doesn't work out, you can always retract and restart.
But I think the biggest fear then comes is like the investment, right? You put the capital investment, the fear of losing that. Mm-hmm. Did you ever have that in the beginning, or?
For me initially, because I got into a very low cost. The investment was really the licenses. The investment was really setting up the businesses. I know everyone's situation is different.
Correct.
Right. So depending on what your personal finance looks like, what your capital availability looks like,
right,
that allows you to explore the type of business you want to get into. Mm-hmm. Like I said, my ideal scenario would have been I invent a product or process, get some investments, get some investors,
right,
run that through the design gate, through production and out. But that requires a lot of capital. And, that would have been one of those thought processes where I would have sat on it for too long, trying to come up with this aha moment,
Correct.
So I explored ideas that came to me, and if I found out that I was actually learning something from it, and at the same time providing value, I continued to embark that journey.
Got it.
Did it for a few years, then I looked at what the next step is, and the next step for me was real estate. And then as I was doing both of those businesses, I also catered my education in parallel to that.
Right.
I wasn't one of those guys who did my, undergrad and postgrad all in one stretch and got it out of the way. I was one of those guys who did my undergrad because I knew I wanted to be an engineer. Then I got into business administration in the corporate world.
Okay.
MBA. Then I wanted to explore a bit more on the finance side of things, master's in finance.
So did master's. Okay.
So catering your education along the way in parallel is extremely important, because then you can relate what you're doing with your education.
That is true.
Yeah. So I think doing it one at a time, and while you're executing, then also trying to figure out, okay, what should my next move be?
Right.
Is very important.
So what advice would you give, like, for someone who's trying to become an entrepreneur, but it kind of takes the capital, right? So it needs a huge capital investment. Do you advise them to get started with that if they don't have any experience in that field, or take your path where you are actually, kind of taking it slowly, with low investment, and learning and developing?
I look at it in two ways, right? So if you absolutely know what you want to do and you're good at it, I always tell people, jump into a business that you're good at, right? And what I mean by that is, if you absolutely know what you want to do, let's say somebody wants to start a restaurant and they've been in the restaurant industry.
Right.
That's a good avenue for that person to go start a restaurant.
Right.
And explore investment opportunities, explore investors, explore capital requirements and things like that, because they know if they got the money and they invested themselves in the capital into it, they can be successful because they've been in that industry.
Correct.
But if you've not been in a restaurant business, someone like me, for example,
right,
it would not be wise for me to jump into that industry not knowing what I'm going to be providing with all the money that I'm getting, right? So for those folks, I'll say try low cost, high return type of businesses, because then you learn the industry,
right,
and at the same time you get to learn how business runs,
and you try to build your confidence,
build your capital.
Correct.
And then eventually it will come to you where you really want to invest in and actually start maybe in acquiring a business or something like that.
How much of a role does confidence have in this entrepreneurship? When you are running a business, or when you're starting a business, you definitely don't know anything about it. But as you're, learning through the process, you're developing this confidence. Does that have a role in taking bigger risk, or is it more weight on the knowledge and experience? How do you go about it?
I think you definitely need confidence, but I'm a firm believer that you build that along the way. You have to be.
It doesn't come at the beginning.
It doesn't always just come in the beginning, because you're not confident, right? You're jumping into something that's unknown, right? But what you have to be willing to do is you have to be willing to learn,
right?
And you have to be willing to fail,
right?
That you're gonna fail.
Have you failed?
Oh, several times.
Okay.
Several times. And, you'll sit with clients, especially at the beginning, you're still learning, but at the same time, you're trying to provide value.
Right.
You're going to stumble through it, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's okay to even tell your clients up front, hey, I'm new, but I have my license. I'm willing to help you out. I have folks in the industry behind my back who are here to help you,
Right.
But the willingness to learn and the willingness to fail, the combination of the two is really what builds the confidence,
Right.
Because from failures, you continue to learn, right?
Right.
And then the more you practice, the more you get confident, I always go back to, Kobe, for example, he says, the reason why he's succeeded so many times, even Jordan said the same thing, is
right,
because they failed more times than they actually succeeded.
That's true.
You know,
Off the court.
off the court. And that's
True.
what builds confidence.
Right.
You know, it's the work that you put in the background. It's the work that you put in the 5 a.m.s, the midnight hours,
That's
you know,
true.
is what really builds your confidence.
That is true. Now, tell me about this, right? So when you have developed your business now you're trying to scale it and you're trying to grow and hire people to your team, right? You're trying to build your team.
Yeah.
Now, it's one thing that you're using your mindset to develop your business, but now you're relying on other people.
Right.
How do you manage that?
So the advantage that I have, and the advantage they have is the fact that they have a seasoned leader who's failed multiple times.
Right.
They're going to fail and they're going to learn too. But at the same time, I can help short circuit a lot of learnings for them that I've learned through my failures.
Correct.
You know, and that's huge, right? So when you have a team, rather than thinking about it in terms of like, well, I'm going to have my team run the show, you got to be almost in the mindset of, how am I going to lead that team, coach that team, so they're growing, and then in return, they're helping our clients, they're helping the business, and the business is helping them. You know, so it's basically like a full circle, and eventually everybody finds value.
Right.
So, and that's really the importance of having a team is, you know, they have to feel like they're actually personally growing and they're also growing their business.
So instead of hand-holding, you're just guiding them in the right direction and letting them make their own decisions on how they want to handle and deal with the clients.
Actually, they have to sit with the clients. I will sit with them in the beginning. And,
Okay.
Yeah, and then they have to take the road on their own, fail on their own.
Right.
You know, usually when I bring somebody on board, I'm hands-on with them.
Yeah.
You know, in the beginning. So I do a lot of hands-on work before I say, you know what, why don't you try this yourself?
Yeah.
You know, I'm here. Try it yourself. You may fail. It's okay.
Wow. So let me pivot a little bit here. So to your business, Whale Apparatus,
Yeah.
right? Now that's a completely different industry.
Yeah.
Something different from what you have been doing in the past now. What gave you the confidence of getting into this business? Why did you pick this business instead of like anything else, right? Or starting your own something? This is an existing business that you took over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So run me through that. What was your mindset in that?
It's not entirely different, but at the same time, yeah, it's a different type of business because now you're taking on a full-on P&L, a full-on real estate. You're basically taking on the entire business, its employees, and you know the entire structure.
And how many employees are there right now?
There's 15 employees.
15 employees.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some relation to what I've done in the past. You know, Whale Apparatus is it's an engineering, manufacturing, and distribution business.
Right.
My career has always been engineering, manufacturing.
Right.
Different types of products and different industries.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to, you know, I wanted to, if I was going to acquire a business, I wanted to acquire it in an industry that I'm familiar with, which is the manufacturing industry, right? Now I always managed a manufacturing business. I've always managed a division, but never really owned one and had been fully responsible for the success or the failures of a business, you know? So one of the key reasons was, you know, acquisition. So when I took one of my courses in one of my postgraduate programs, one of the courses I took was M&A, mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, good. Okay.
That really spoke to my soul, you know. And I was talking to my wife and I said, you know, if I could work for a company, I wonder what it would take to actually buy one, you know. And her immediate response was, you mean you're going to go find a job? You're going to get a promotion? I said, no, actually own a business. And I said, you know, I'm not going to go out of my way and just go own any business.
Right.
You know, I want to keep it within the realms of my knowledge and the industry that I've been in, which is manufacturing.
Correct.
product line might be different. I have to learn that industry and the product line, which is the challenge,
Right.
and which I'm willing to take. And, I've been looking for several years. And then when this opportunity came, I thought this was the right fit and the right timing for me to actually jump in and actually, complete the acquisition and take it on and see what I could do with it.
So what's next for you from here?
For me, that's a really good question. The question that I always ask myself is, how can I provide more value to the industry, to our community, to the global population, right?
Right.
So that's the question that I ask. And it's not always about a linear growth of just doing multiple acquisitions and, just
Correct.
owning a bunch of business. It's more about what's the quality of the value that I provide, So we have some initiatives going on at Whale. I have some initiatives going on in the real estate industry.
Okay.
And the focus around both of those is really, okay, what does our customers need? What does the society need? What does this industry need? What's the industry lacking that we can provide?
Right.
Of course, as a business, you're looking at cash flow, but I always tell my team, focus on service, focus on quality of the service that we provide, and the cash will come.
That's true.
So whereas if it's the other way around, you just focus on cash,
Right.
customers, clients can read right through it. And you may not have a, long-standing customer or a sustaining business, So it's really, I don't think I'm looking to play in a different industry.
Right.
I think right now I've figured out my industries that I want to play in. And where I'm right now, it's really the real estate industry and the engineering manufacturing industry.
Okay.
And just play within that sandbox, but see what other value that I can provide to.
Got it. Now, we do have a time restriction here, so I'm going to ask you a question about knowing what you know right now, right? If you could go back into your early 20s, what advice would you give to yourself in your early 20s?
Learn more, gain more knowledge. My mindset was different in my early 20s. My focus was really, I just want to get through undergrad.
Okay.
And get my degree and, learn what the school's teaching me and get a job, Even though I had that entrepreneurial mind, my thinking back then was really, how can I just maybe start a business and get some money, make some money, And that we all fall into that trap,
right?
When we think business and everybody thinks business, the first thing that comes to mind is money.
Money.
I would say learn more. Because when you're an undergrad, we underestimate the time that we have. 20 years later, you realize how much more responsibility you have, how little time you have.
Right.
And you're trying to learn within that time frame.
Correct.
Right. But when you're an undergrad, you have all the time in your hands. Right.
That is true.
And if you really just maximize that time and just learn as much as you can, just be a sponge, you have more opportunities to explore what you really want to be involved in.
Got it. Tell me something about a misconception, that people have when they think about starting a business that you also had and kind of faded away along the way.
Yeah, I think there are multiple misconceptions. I think one of them is folks think it's extremely hard to start one,
Okay.
And really it really isn't.
Okay.
If you really put your mind to just wanting to start a business.
Right.
In this day and age, there's so many industries you can, put your foot into. And even on a very small scale, you can start. People think about the peak of the mountain.
That is true.
Too fast.
Right.
And they look that high way too fast.
Right.
And then they decide for themselves that that's impossible to get.
That's true.
Rather than looking at the first step that they've got to take, it might be at a lower level, at a lower scale.
Yeah.
I think that's one misconception. The other one is I think folks want to make money too fast,
right,
too soon, and when they don't see that when they don't picture that, they don't get into it.
Right.
As opposed to, hey, if I put the work in, maybe cash is not there right away.
Right.
If I focus on service, if I focus on learning more, if I focus on the value, then eventually the cash will come.
That's
Companies
true.
like Amazon ran at a loss for years before they turned
Maybe
a
for a
profit.
decade, yeah.
Right.
True.
So, and it started out with one man's vision,
That is true.
in his garage, right? So, I think those are the couple of key misconceptions that people have, and that they don't get into it. It's I'm not getting cash too fast, or, well, that's too far to get,
So you believe in consistency as a key?
Huge. Consistency is key. That's why I think whatever you decide to do, figure out what the next step is.
Correct.
That next step is so important.
Yeah.
Do that repeatedly.
Yeah.
If
And
you're,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're going to wake up at 5 a.m. and your 5 a.m. routine is to work out, do it every day. Because maybe that's what clears your mind to do the very next thing.
Correct.
And at 6 a.m., if your routine is to learn something about the business you want to get into,
right,
at 6 a.m. every day, find something to learn about that business. So it's huge as far as little steps and consistent steps that'll lead you to like where you want to be.
Recently, I just read this in a book. Like, as long as you're improving yourself by 1%, at least 1% every day, it's compounding to a lot for your future. So just continue working on that. Amazing. That's a good advice. Mentors. Did you have, I know a lot of successful people, right? They all had mentors in their life.
Yeah.
Did you have any mentors that, you want to acknowledge?
Yes. I've had a lot of mentors. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of good mentors along the way.
Okay.
And it's also essential to find mentors,
Okay. So you do find value in that?
Huge.
Right.
I think that value is underestimated. If we go with the notion of, I want to learn it myself, and, I want to know everything too fast, too soon,
right.
You're not learning far enough. Mentors have had years of experience that they can, like I said, short circuit for you.
That is true.
They can hold your hand. I've had mentors throughout my corporate business that, folks who have hired me, folks who have trained me, folks who have who wanted to see me take the next step.
Okay.
Among all those mentors, I'd say, it started at home for me. My dad's my role model.
Wonderful.
I always get asked that question about, role model, mentor. And I've always followed my dad's footsteps. He was an engineer, even at the age of 10, 11 years old, when I didn't know what engineering was. I had made up my mind that I wanted to be an engineer.
Wow. Okay.
So I think it starts at home. Like I said, it started with my dad. He's a role model. And then every business or every company that I work for, I've had key mentors in each one of those businesses that I leaned on to get valuable advice.
Amazing. I want to ask you about the societal pressure, right? When people think about starting a business, something different from what the society kind of expects about you, right? Did you ever have those kind of challenges, when you started deviating from the norm, going into something that you really loved?
Yeah, people have a certain framework that they put you in.
Absolutely.
And the expectation is you kind of rise in that framework.
Correct.
People are entitled to their opinion. I think everybody has an opinion, and I think it's the right thing that's really, you want to hear those opinions, because those are the opinions that really start to shape you, So why is an engineer getting into the financial industry? Why are we trying to, roll over 401ks? Why are you looking at retirement plans? Why are you, there's a lot of questions, right? And I think it's important to hear those questions, because I use those questions as self-validation too.
Like a self-reaffirmation.
Reaffirmation that, hey, it's proof that you're doing something different. And if you really want to do something different, then you know that you're headed in the right path.
That is correct.
No matter what industry you're in, right? So I think it's important to not fall into those traps. It's important to listen to those questions, and important to use those questions as like self-validation, and then just continue to move forward with your vision. I think that's huge, is to listen but drown those noises and stay focused on what your vision is.
Not easy.
Not easy. I mean, I always say, take the long-term approach to everybody. I always say and I've experienced it too, whatever you're doing today, whatever you're doing now has a 7-year lag, has a 7-year return.
So you're sowing the seed right now.
Correct.
For the tree or the plant that you're going to see in 7 years from now.
And when you're sowing seeds and when you're watering those seeds, that's when the questions come, because the outside folks don't see it.
Right.
You don't see it.
Right.
But you have a vision of how you want that tree to look. So follow your vision, listen to the folks, but drown that noise.
Right.
And then just know that what you're doing right now will yield benefits slowly over the course of 7 years.
So if you could give one advice, right, to the listeners about, building that courage, or, going and taking that leap to start the business that they want to start, or become an entrepreneur, what advice would you have for them in that direction?
I think, like I said, I go back to, in your earlier years, like, in your teens, in your 20s, be a sponge. There's no requirement to have it all figured out by then. I think I'm going back to the societal pressure of knowing what you should be right out of high school and knowing what you should be right out of college.
Right.
Oftentimes, folks don't realize that they have the time to explore it. So I would say learn as much as possible.
Right.
Explore whatever you want to explore, because there's so many industries to explore, And when you do that, things will open up, opportunities will open up, your mind will open up.
Right.
And then you'll know where you want to add value. We all add value to the society in our own ways. Everybody adds value in their own ways. I would not put one profession or one business over the other, because I think all of the businesses come together, all of the professions come together to add strong and common value to the global society.
Right.
So explore as many avenues as you can, learn about them, then eventually these opportunities will open up to you, and you'll know exactly which sandbox you want to play in.
And that wraps up our conversation with Robin Thomas. We wish him all the success in his journey and truly appreciate him sharing his insights with us today. If you found value in this episode, let me know. Drop a comment or share your thoughts. Your feedback helps me to create even better content for you. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode in the future. You've been an amazing audience. Until next time, thank you for joining me.